This is the hardest movie I have ever tried to film. I have tried filming this so many times today, and all I have to say is I have so much respect for all you booktubers out there who just give these awesome synopses of books, and oh my gosh, it blows my mind. So you're at the bookstore looking for a book to read, and you're perusing through one, and it just is so boring. You just look at the back and you're like, oh god, ugh. It's a historical fiction, so boring. And then you start to wonder yourself, why does anybody even write historical fiction? As writers of historical fictions ourselves, I have teamed up with Peggy Spencer, fellow author, tuber, and writer of historical fiction, to bring you this historical fiction collab to help you understand why it is exactly that anybody writes historical fiction, why maybe you should write historical fiction, and how you can make that historical fiction not only worth reading, but a real page-turner. So first off, why would anybody want to write a historical fiction? For any of you out there who love history, I don't even have to explain this to you because I am one of you. I love history. I love to read it. I love to write it. I love to learn about it. It is so fascinating to me. And for anybody who loves history, they just want other people to love it too. And they want to tell these stories from history. Historical fiction writers spend a ton of time doing research. One thing that can often go awry with writing a historical fiction is that they forget about the fiction aspect, and they are so focused on getting the history right that it ends up just really dry. It ends up feeling more like you're reading a textbook than an actual story. So I have done the hard work and found all of the good historical fiction books so that you don't have to. And in my part of this collab today, I'm going to be showing you 4 examples of ways that you can breathe life into your historical fiction and make it not boring. So here I have 4 historical fictions. Woo! I have 4 historical fictions that are distinctly not boring, and I'm going to show you exactly what makes them not boring and how you can incorporate elements of these fantastic historical fictions to make your own writing, whether you are writing a historical fiction or really in any genre. These tips can help you to improve your writing and make your storytelling just that much more exciting. Tip number 1 to improve your historical fiction and make it distinctly not boring would be to tell your story from an unpopular point of view. So the example that I've chosen for this tip is Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind is historical fiction that takes place during the American Civil War. It follows our protagonist, the spoiled and selfish Scarlet O'Hara, the main character who you just love to hate. Throughout the story, she will stop at nothing to get what she wants, even if it means crushing the lives of everyone around her. I've chosen this one as an example not only because the protagonist is kind of more of an anti-hero, but also because this story specifically is told from an unpopular perspective of the South. So often nowadays when we think about the American Civil War, we tend to think of the northern states as the good guys and the southern states as the bad guys. But in Gone with the Wind, we get to see the entire Civil War through the perspective of the southern states, and we actually sympathize with the southern states, which is, in my opinion, brilliant. So this was written by Margaret Mitchell. And she did a really, really good job, honestly, of making me sympathize with the southern states and helping me to see what it is that was important to them, what they valued, and to see them as the good guys, whereas the northern states are the bad guys. It's just brilliant. And honestly, I think it can be kind of healthy to read things from a perspective that is unpopular and from a perspective that you don't agree with. If there is any period in history that you are particularly fond of, if you can tell that story from the unpopular perspective that we probably haven't heard it from before, that would be awesome. Tip number 2 is to add an unlikely hero. So for my example of this, I've chosen The Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness Orczy. The Scarlet Pimpernel is considered an older classic, but it is, in my opinion, one of my absolute favorite historical fictions, and to be honest, just one of the most delicious books I've ever read. The Scarlet Pimpernel takes place during the French Revolution, during a time when anyone with any sort of ties to royalty or to nobility was being imprisoned and beheaded at the guillotine. The Scarlet Pimpernel is a mysterious hero who sneaks into France in the dead of night in various disguises and manages to smuggle out prisoners who are on their way to the guillotine before they are beheaded. But the Scarlet Pimpernel's best disguise is actually not one that he wears while he is in France. It is the disguise of his true identity, which is Sir Percy Blakeney, an Englishman who everyone considers to be very foppish, and all he cares about is his clothes and spouting off silly riddles. He is the last person that anyone would expect to be this infamous hero who daringly storms into France to rescue people. His disguise is so good that even his own wife is unaware that he is in fact the Scarlet Pimpernel, the man that she swoons over and thinks is such an amazing hero who she hopes is going to save her brother at some point. Other examples of this unlikely hero twisted into real historical events would be things such as the Mask of Zorro or Robin Hood, things like that. That's a hero story that is planted into a historical event and turns it into a thriller, a mystery, something more suspenseful, and just adds that extra element. You have to remember, writing historical fiction, there is fiction. It's not just historical, it's fiction. And so you can take advantage of that fictional aspect by creating a really great hero. Add an unlikely hero to your story, it'll make everything so much more exciting. The third element that you can add to your historical fiction to really spice it up and breathe life into your history is humor. This is a huge one, and for an example of humor, though there are many, I have chosen The Help. The Help takes place during the 1960s in Jackson, Mississippi, during a time when African Americans were most often employed as domestic servants in white households. The story follows a wonderful cast of characters: Skeeter, who is a white young woman on the hunt for a great story to write, and then Eveline, Minnie, and many others who are the African-American domestic servants that Skeeter decides she is going to interview to better understand what it's like to be them. This was such a great idea for a historical fiction because honestly, one of the big things that you want to do in historical fiction is to find those minority groups whose stories have not classically been told, and to bring those stories to light and share them with everybody in a way that is interesting and enlightening and inspiring and shocking in a lot of cases. Another example of this would be Before We Were Yours, that exposed the scandal behind a lot of orphanages around the 1920s and 1930s. This one exposes the racism that was going on in the Deep South during the 1960s. But even handling such heavy subjects, The Help really stands out because of the humor that really lightens the story, makes it feel more real and relatable, and makes you fall in love with the characters. Humor can really add a lot to your historical fiction that will make it easier to read, more enjoyable to read, and something that people will not want to put down and they will remember and likely read again. This is one of my favorite historical fiction. And lastly, tip number 4 is to use a unique writing style to tell your historical fiction story. So the best example of this, I think, out there would be The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. The Book Thief takes place during World War II on the German front. It follows a young German girl known as the Book Thief because she cannot read and she likes to collect books in the hopes of maybe teaching herself how to read. She has a fascination with words and with books, and as she sees all of these Nazis in the street burning a lot of books, she wonders why they're burning these books, and she goes and she steals them. But what makes this book stand out more than anything, the story could be interesting on its own, but what really makes the book stand out is that it is narrated entirely by death. as if death is an actual character in the book. And it was such a brilliant idea of Markus Zusak to have death narrate this story because it takes place during a time of war when there was a lot of death. Creates this foreshadowing throughout the book that we know the protagonist is either going to die or will be exposed to a lot of death at least 3 times throughout the book. And so as we are reading her story and following her daily interactions with other kids on the streets or with the older married couple with whom she lives, throughout all of this, there is this undertone of something is coming, death is coming to somebody, or to all of them, or to her, and you don't really know which. But the style of this book it just really sucks you in, and it's so interesting. It's not really like anything else I've ever read before. The style is very unique. So if you're going to write a historical fiction, a really great idea is to try your hand at a unique writing style in which to tell your story. So that concludes my portion of this historical fiction collab. I hope that you enjoyed it. For tips on how to better balance the history with the fiction, hop on over to Peggy Spencer's channel. She's got some really great advice over there. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe if you have not already. Give this video a like. Comment below if you have ever read historical fiction or if you have not, what you think of it. Do you like historical fiction? Do you think it's boring? Have you read any of these books? Did you like them? What is your favorite historical fiction? Maybe I've read it, maybe I haven't. I'm always looking for some great recommendations of great historical fictions to read, as I am a historical fiction writer myself. And I will see you guys next time. Bye. This is the most awkward video I think I've ever filmed. This is why I don't do book reviews. It's so hard.
Rain, would you come and take a walk with me? We'll cross over the mountains and we'll reach the pale blue sea. I love you, I'm so glad you love me too. And I wrote this song for you, every word